In South Carolina, it was a primary, very similar to our primaries here. Up in Minnesota, they have caucuses, but they're very different. They are in the evening. They were from 6:30 until 8 o'clock. You had to be at your polling place during that period of time. But it is by secret ballot. They call it a caucus, but you don't have to make it known publicly like in Iowa. You stand in this corner and they count heads. In Minnesota, they call it a caucus, but you go to a room or you go to a polling site, basically fill out a ballot, and you can leave. So they call it a caucus, but three very different experiences. And in all three, the voter turnout in the Democrat primary and or caucuses have been literally doubled, if not more than that. Up in Minnesota, on an average year, on an average presidential election, there is approximately 50, maybe 60,000 people that participated in a Democrat caucus. One year, the year Hubert Humphrey was on the ballot, because he's from Minnesota, they had 76,000 people turn up. But on an average year, around 50,000. This year, there was 150,000 people. And you can about imagine the polling places, the caucus locations, they were so ill prepared for that kind of a turnout. There were lines, traffic jams, people couldn't get to the polling places. There were lines literally blocks and blocks long. It got to the point at the polls were open from 6:30 till 8. At about 9 o'clock, I was actually in an office fielding calls and telling people where they could go, where their caucus was, until 8 o'clock. After that, we went to one of these caucus locations, and this is about 9 or 9:30. The polls had closed at 8 o'clock, and there was still 1 block long of people standing outside, and some of those people had stood outside in the cold for up to 2 hours. 2 hours in the cold, and it was cold. You know, it was not bitter, but it was 20 degrees out. And so many people finally, and there were a number of people who finally just got discouraged and left. But when I got there, think about this. When I got there, they had a cardboard box, which was where you put the ballots in, and it was just a normal cardboard box with a slit in the top. And these folks were lined up down the street, and they were coming up, and they had a piece of paper that big around, and all they had to do was write Obama or Barack or Hillary or Senator Clinton or whatever they wanted to, hand wrote it on there and stuffed it in the box. That was there was no ballots. They ran out of ballots. They had ballots initially at one point in time, but they'd run out of those long time ago. And they just literally took a piece of white paper and tore it into about 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 pieces, and that's what they were using. They were just writing Obama, Barack, Senator, whatever they wanted to write on there and stuffing it in the ballot. And it was I just had never seen anything like it. And the people that were really running that, for the most part, were just volunteers. They were volunteers with different campaigns. There were really no election officials there. It's just, I'd never seen anything like it, especially compared to what we do here in Illinois and even compared to some of the other states. So what a contrast that we've seen. One thing that I've seen, and I talked about the huge voter turnout in these Democrat primaries and caucuses, the number of young people involved has been just astronomical. Down in South Carolina, the morning of the election, it's election morning. The polls opened at, I think, 7 o'clock, I believe. And my job down there, I was in charge of a precinct and trying to get the folks out to vote. And it was kind of not a very nice day in South Carolina, I thought it was lovely, but it was raining and it was a little bit cool. And some of my supporters, some of my volunteers didn't show up that morning. They were late at least getting there. And so at about 8 o'clock, we're supposed to be starting to knock on doors, and not enough people were showing up. In the campaign office door walks 7 college kids. They had driven all night. 3 or 4 of them were from Florida. A couple were from Virginia, and I think there was one maybe locally. They just walked in out of the blue into this campaign office and said, "We're here to help." And I said, thank goodness. I was so glad to see them. And I gave them walk sheets and I gave them some lit, and they knocked on doors all day. It's just an indication of how the young people have really gotten involved in this campaign. I think a lot of it because of Senator Obama, but certainly, as Governor Edgar said, I think it's the Democrats have it may be their time. I think that it is our year. So a tremendous amount of enthusiasm there. I'll end in closing and kind of talk a little bit about why Barack Obama and where his appeal is coming from. And I've narrowed it down to 4 or 5 items. I think he comes across and he is a very sincere person. I think he's in this race for the right reasons. He has his little campaign buttons that say hope. I think a better word would be inspiration. He has inspired people. He's made people believe in their leadership in Washington. They feel that he can engage the public in the discussions and the problems that we're facing in Washington. He's a tremendous listener. I don't know how many of you have had the chance to actually talk to Barack one-on-one, but when you are talking to him, he's looking you right in the eye. And he is listening to what you say. And whether it's a politician or anybody else, when you're talking to him, nothing bothers me more than to have, talking to somebody and they're looking over my shoulder, seeing who else they can talk to next or what's going on. They're not really listening. Barack listens to what you say, and I think that is critical. I think it's one of the most important leadership qualities of anybody that serves in office. Some people have tried to make this campaign, and Frank, turn your phone off, would you please? Oh. Good comeback. They've tried to make this race about race and gender, and as far as I'm concerned, that is not the issue. Barack Obama won big in Iowa, which is I think the minorities representation there is about 2 or 3%. He won big in South Carolina, where the minority representation is probably 60 or 70%. I mean, he has such a wide popularity. I do not believe it is about race or gender. It's about leadership and turning this country around. His message has been trying to bring people together, work together. We have seen, and Frank, it's ironic that your phone rang because I was going to refer to you anyway, and the fact that you saw, as well as I and others that served with Barack, his ability to bring people together. And I think it's ironic that Senator Kirk Dillard, who is the former Republican chairman of DuPage County, who I was in Minnesota, and I'm watching a Barack commercial, and there's Kirk Dillard on Barack Obama's commercial, talking about Barack and his ability to bring people together. He does have that ability. As I'm knocking on doors, if I can get somebody to listen to me, especially if they're an undecided, I will tell them that it doesn't matter to Barack whether you're black or white or blue or green or purple or red. What's important to him, and it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or an independent, what's important to him is that he is about bringing people to the table. He will give you a seat at the table if you're willing to sit down and try to come up with solutions to the problems that this country is facing. I'm going to stop here and just say, where we go from here, I don't know. Governor Edgar gave a great perspective on the political side of, where we go from here. Barack has done what many people did not think was possible to do. We've got a race that's basically a dead heat. These last few caucuses and primaries that are left are going to be just as vigorously defended and fought for as the ones up to this time. I think my days of leaving the state and going to do some additional campaigning are probably over, because we go back in session next week, and I'm not going to have as much time as I've had up to now. But I've certainly enjoyed it. It's been a great experience, and thank you very much.